At 39 years old, Cato was worth approximately $87,000, most of which was tied up in a 2019 Toyota 4Runner and the modest savings account he'd maintained since college. His primary asset, a groundbreaking piece of predictive analytics software for ski resorts, was an intangible he'd poured a decade of his life into. His salary as founder and CEO of Aspen Snowmass Ventures was a self-imposed $65,000 a year, just enough to cover his half of the bills on the life he shared with his wife, Elisha. Tonight, on the eve of his 40th birthday, he felt the full weight of that financial disparity. He sat at a reserved table in Element 47, the flagship restaurant inside Aspen's famed five-star hotel, the Little Nell. The bill for this dinner, a celebration he hadn't wanted, would likely exceed 2 months of his take-home pay. He knew this because Elisha had made the reservation and had casually mentioned the prix-fixe menu was $500 per person, before wine. They were a party of 4: Cato, Elisha, her father, Beaumont, and her best friend, Piper. The air was thick with the scent of white truffle and quiet money. Beaumont, a man whose deep brown skin was offset by a shock of perfectly groomed white hair, adjusted the cuffs of his $6,000 Brioni suit. He looked at Cato's simple navy blue Xenia sweater, a $900 birthday gift from Elisha that morning, already making him feel like an imposter, and sighed a soft, theatrical sigh of disappointment. 40, Beaumont said, his voice a low rumble that cut through the clinking of crystal silverware. It's an important milestone, a time for a man to take stock of his position in the world. He picked up his wine glass, a burgundy Grand Cru that cost more than Cato's first car, a 1998 Honda Civic. He swirled the deep red liquid, a $1,200 bottle of Domaine de la Romane Conti. When Alicia's ex-husband Josiah turned 40, he had just acquired his third private jet, a Gulfstream G650, I believe. Cato felt the familiar heat rise up his neck. He kept his eyes on his plate, a delicate arrangement of seared scallops and foam that probably cost $75. He felt Elisha's hand rest on his thigh, a gesture that was supposed to be comforting but felt like an instruction to stay silent. Her long, elegant braids, woven with subtle gold thread, cascaded over the shoulder of her $4,200 Balmain dress. Her skin, a luminous, warm brown, seemed to glow in the restaurant's artfully dim lighting. "Dad, please," Elisha murmured, though there was no force behind it. Her tone was one of mild exasperation, not defense. Beaumont ignored her. He took a slow, deliberate sip of wine, his eyes locked on Cato. Josiah was a man of substance, a man who understood his worth and, more importantly, the worth of my daughter. He placed the glass down with a definitive click. The table went silent. Cato could hear his own heartbeat, a frantic drum against the cage of his ribs. He looked at his wife, pleading with his eyes for her to say something, to shut this down. She just offered a tight, apologetic smile, a silent shrug that said, "You know how he is." Her silence was the real betrayal, a wound far deeper than her father's words. Then Beaumont leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial, venomous whisper that was somehow louder than a shout. "I'll be honest, Cato. I've tried to see what she sees in you. I truly have. But as you sit here on your 40th birthday, I have to say it. You're not half the man her ex was." The life Cato had built with Elisha was a facade, a beautiful stage set for a play he hadn't realized he was performing in. They lived on Red Mountain in a sprawling, 7,000-square-foot modern home with glass walls that overlooked the entire Roaring Fork Valley. The property was valued at $14.5 million. It was Beaumont's wedding gift, though the deed was held in a trust he controlled, a fact he reminded Cato of with punishing regularity. Cato's contribution to their domestic life was his presence, his quiet love, and his tireless work on what Elisha and her father called his little computer project. Their days had a rhythm of curated normalcy. On a typical Tuesday morning at 6:15 a.m., Cato would be in the cavernous, all-white kitchen, grinding beans for coffee. The machine, a $3,800 La Marzocco Linea Mini, was another gift. He would make Elisha's oat milk latte just the way she liked it, with a specific brand of Swedish oat milk that cost $9 a carton. He'd bring it to her in their bedroom, where she'd be scrolling through Instagram on her latest iPhone 14 Pro, the $1,100 device already seeming old to her. "Thanks, babe," she would say, not looking up from the screen. He remembered one Saturday afternoon last fall. He'd spent the day in the garage, a space that held Elisha's white Porsche Taycan Turbo S, a $190,000 electric marvel, and his own aging Toyota 4Runner, which he'd bought used for $28,000 5 years ago. He was changing the oil in the Toyota, his hands covered in grease, a feeling of satisfaction washing over him. It was real, tangible work. Elisha had walked in, holding a small velvet box. She was wearing a $1,200 Lululemon workout set for a yoga class she had decided to skip. "What are you doing?" she asked, her nose wrinkled at the smell of motor oil. "Just some basic maintenance," he said, smiling up at her. He was proud of his ability to fix things, a skill learned from his own father, a mechanic from Denver's Five Points neighborhood. She sighed, a sound of profound weariness. "Cato, we have people for that. My father's driver could have one of his guys handle this for $100. You look ridiculous." She opened the box. Inside was a watch, a Patek Philippe Calatrava, with a gleaming rose gold case. "This is from Daddy, an early birthday present. It's worth about $35,000. He said it's time you wore a real watch, not that plastic thing." She was referring to his $350 Garmin 4Runner, the watch he used to track his trail runs, the watch that had mapped every mile of his journey in building his company. He looked from her perfectly manicured nails to his own, which were stained with grease and dirt. "Elisha, I like my watch." "Don't be difficult," she said, her voice sharp. "Just wear it. It's about appearances, Cato. It's about showing you belong." She left the $35,000 watch box on a workbench next to a greasy socket wrench and walked back into the pristine house. He had no idea then that her words were not just about a watch, but about his entire existence in her world. He was a project to be improved, a placeholder to be managed. The watch stayed in its box, a silent testament to the gulf between them. Their home was filled with these expensive ghosts: a $25,000 Fazioli piano no one played, a set of $600 Baccarat crystal glasses for parties they rarely hosted, and art on the walls, a Joan Mitchell print worth at least $50,000 that Elisha had chosen with a designer. Cato's only personal touch was a small, framed photo on his nightstand of him and his parents, taken outside their modest brick bungalow in Denver. It was a world away from the cold glass and steel of Red Mountain. He was living in her museum, not their home. The humiliation was a slow drip poison, administered in small daily doses that had accumulated into a lethal concentration. Beaumont's cruelty was the most overt, but Elisha's was the most damaging. 1,000 tiny cuts of dismissal and condescension. Her betrayals were rarely loud. They were whispered in asides, conveyed in sighs, and demonstrated through a pattern of casual disregard that left Cato feeling utterly alone, even when she was sitting right next to him. He recalled a dinner party they'd attended 6 months prior at the home of one of Beaumont's business partners in the exclusive Starwood community. The host, a real estate developer named Marcus Thorne, was a black man of Beaumont's generation, all old money and quiet power. The conversation turned to business. Marcus, a genuinely curious man with warm eyes, asked Cato about his venture. "So, Cato, Beaumont tells me you're in tech," Marcus said, swirling a glass of scotch worth $300 a pour. "Something to do with skiing?" Before Cato could answer, Elisha laughed, a light, tinkling sound that grated on his nerves. "Oh, it's his passion project. He makes little charts that tell you if it's going to be a powder day. It's very cute." She said the word cute, as if describing a child's drawing. The table, filled with people who traded in billion-dollar commodities and global equities, went quiet. Cato felt the blood drain from his face. His little charts were the product of a decade of sleepless nights, of teaching himself to code, of developing a proprietary algorithm that ingested terabytes of atmospheric, geological, and historical snowpack data. His software didn't just predict powder days. It optimized resort operations, from snowmaking to staffing to dynamic ticket pricing, with a proven 30% increase in operational efficiency. It was a revolutionary tool that was about to make him one of the wealthiest men in the state. He tried to recover. "It's a bit more complex than that," he began, his voice tight. "We've developed a predictive analytics platform that—" Beaumont cut him off, waving a dismissive hand. "He's modest. What he means is he's found a very clever way to play with his hobby." He turned to Marcus. "Now, about that new hotel development in Dubai?" The conversation moved on, leaving Cato stranded. He looked at Elisha, who was already engaged in a lively chat with the woman next to her about a recent trip to Paris and a $15,000 Hermes Birkin bag she was trying to acquire. She didn't glance his way. She hadn't defended him. She had, in fact, supplied the ammunition for her father's shot. The rest of the evening, he felt like a ghost at the table, a silent observer whose presence was tolerated, but not valued. The meal cost more than his monthly rent used to be, and he tasted none of it. The comparisons to Josiah were a constant corrosive theme. Josiah, her first husband, was the scion of a Chicago banking family. He and Elisha had divorced amicably, a conscious uncoupling of two dynasties. To Beaumont, Josiah was the gold standard, and Cato was a perpetual disappointment. One Sunday, Elisha was getting ready for a brunch with friends at the Aspen Art Museum. Cato was on his laptop at the kitchen island, troubleshooting a server issue. His company was in the final, delicate stages of due diligence with a potential acquirer, a process so secret he hadn't even told Elisha the full extent of it. He'd simply said things were getting serious. She walked past him, her phone pressed to her ear. "No, Piper, I know," she was saying, her voice laced with frustration. "Of course he's not coming. He's working on the computer again. Honestly, it's like being married to a garage inventor." A pause. "I know. Josiah would never. We'd be in St. Bart's right now. Remember that time he chartered that 200-foot yacht just for the weekend? That was living." Cato froze, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. She knew he could hear her. She didn't care. It was a deliberate act of cruelty. He closed his laptop. The quiet click echoed in the massive kitchen. She ended the call and turned to him, her expression annoyed, as if he were the one who had created the awkwardness. "What? Did you mean for me to hear that, Elisha?" he asked, his voice dangerously calm. "Hear what? That I miss having a husband who knows how to relax? Who doesn't spend every weekend hunched over a screen like a teenager? The man you're comparing me to inherited $200 million on his 18th birthday. I'm building something from nothing. I thought you were proud of that." She sighed, the sound of a martyr. "Oh, Cato, of course I'm proud. But there's a difference between being driven and being obsessed. It's my birthday brunch, and you're dressed in a 5-year-old hoodie that smells like coffee. Josiah used to wear custom-tailored Tom Ford. It's just a different level of respect for me." for himself. Each word was a meticulously chosen weapon. His hoodie, a comfortable favorite, was now a symbol of disrespect. His work, the culmination of his life's ambition, was an obsession that inconvenienced her. The comparison was the final twist of the knife. He was being judged not for his character, his love, or his brilliance, but for his failure to be someone else, a man who represented effortless, inherited wealth. The outrage had been accumulating for years, a reservoir of pain held back by a dam of hope. He hoped she would one day see him for who he was. He hoped her father would eventually respect his achievements. He hoped their love was real. But sitting at that table in the Little Nell, with Beaumont's insult hanging in the air, Cato finally understood. The dam was about to break. He had been so focused on building his company, he had failed to see that his own marriage was a hostile takeover, and he was the one being acquired and stripped for parts. What he didn't know was that the final piece of evidence, the one that would clarify everything, was only moments away. The silence that followed Beaumont's insult was a physical thing. It pressed in on Cato, sucking the air from the room. The clinking of distant silverware, the murmur of other conversations, it all faded into a dull roar in his ears. He saw Elisha's lips move, forming another placating, meaningless phrase for her father. He saw Beaumont lean back, a smug, satisfied look on his face, the look of a man who had just landed a killing blow and knew it. Cato felt nothing. It was a strange, terrifying, and ultimately liberating sensation. The pain he expected, the white-hot anger, it wasn't there. In its place was a profound and sudden cold, a clarity so sharp it felt like a shard of ice in his chest. He was a line of code. He was a variable in their equation. He was an asset being evaluated, and he had been found wanting. And then, into that frozen silence, Piper stood up. Piper, Elisha's best and most loyal friend, a woman whose life was a whirlwind of social events and champagne lunches, funded by a generous divorce settlement of her own. She was wearing a vibrant $3,500 Missoni dress, and her smile was wide and genuine. She was, Cato realized, completely oblivious to the emotional carnage that had just occurred. She thought the silence was a respectful pause, a moment of anticipation. She raised her glass of $50 a glass Veuve Clicquot. "Well," she chirped, her voice bright and celebratory, "since Beaumont is being such a grump, I think someone needs to make a proper toast for the birthday boy. I, for one, think what you've accomplished is incredible, Cato." Cato looked at her, then at Elisha, whose face had suddenly gone rigid. A flicker of panic entered her eyes. "Piper, maybe not right now," Elisha began, her voice a strained whisper. But Piper was already in motion, a force of bubbly, well-intentioned nature. "Nonsense," she declared, her voice carrying across the hushed dining room. "I mean, my God. Elisha told me everything, and I've been sworn to secrecy, but the deal is closed now, right? So we can celebrate. To Cato." She beamed at him, her eyes sparkling. Cato's mind, a machine built for pattern recognition and data analysis, went into overdrive. "Elisha told me everything, sworn to secrecy. The deal is closed." Piper raised her glass higher. "To the man of the hour, the quiet genius who just sold Aspen Snowmass Ventures to Vail Resorts for $500 million. We are all so proud of you. And Elisha girl, you are about to have a very fun decade. Congratulations, you two." The sound of her words hit the table with the force of a physical impact. Beaumont, who had been looking bored and superior, slowly lowered his wine glass. His jaw went slack. His eyes, wide with shock, darted from Piper to Elisha, and then, finally, to Cato. The smugness was gone, replaced by a frantic, calculating expression. He was doing the math. Elisha's face was a mask of pure horror. She looked like a ghost, her luminous brown skin suddenly ashen. "Piper, you idiot," she mouthed, the words silent but clear. But Cato wasn't looking at Elisha anymore. He was looking at the pieces on the board, which had been scattered and confusing just moments before. Now Piper's toast had illuminated the entire game. The secrecy. The reason he hadn't told Alicia the final number or the closing date was because of the strict non-disclosure agreement Vale had insisted on. The deal had only officially closed yesterday, Friday, at 4:59 p.m. The wire transfer for $500 million had hit his company's account, an account he alone controlled. He hadn't even told his own parents yet. But Elisha knew. She knew the number. She knew the buyer. She knew the deal was done. And she hadn't heard it from him. She must have had her own source. A lawyer? A friend at the bank? It didn't matter. What mattered was that she knew. And she was sharing that information with her friend not as a celebration of his success, but as a prelude to her payday. "You are about to have a very fun decade." The words echoed in the cold, clear space in his mind. This wasn't a marriage. It was a hostile, long-term investment. Beaumont's insults, Elisha's dismissiveness, the constant comparisons to Josiah, it was all a strategy. It was designed to diminish him, to grind him down, to make him feel so worthless that when the time came, he would be grateful to give her half of everything he'd ever worked for, just to escape the humiliation. They thought he was a fool, a simple, earnest tech guy who didn't understand the rules of their world. He had made a critical mistake. He had believed it was about love. Cato slowly picked up his water glass. His hand was perfectly steady. He looked directly at Piper, whose smile was just beginning to falter as she sensed the tension. He offered her a small, calm smile. "Thank you, Piper," he said, his voice even and clear. "I appreciate the thought." He took a sip of water. He did not look at his wife. He did not acknowledge her father. He placed the glass down, folded his napkin, and placed it on the table. In that moment, sitting amidst the ruins of his marriage, Cato had never felt more powerful. He finally understood the game, and he was about to change the rules. The ride home was a masterclass in controlled silence. Elisha attempted to fill the void in the $190,000 Porsche Taycan, her voice a frantic, high-pitched stream of damage control. Cato drove his own forerunner, following her up the winding road to their glass-walled prison on Red Mountain. When they arrived, she was waiting for him in the garage, her arms crossed, the picture of defensive fury. "I cannot believe Piper did that," she started, before he'd even closed his car door. "She is such a scatterbrain. I only told her because I was so excited for you. For us. I made her swear she wouldn't say anything." Cato walked past her, his old leather briefcase in hand. He didn't respond. He felt a strange detachment, as if he were watching a movie of his own life. The character of his wife was delivering her lines, but the sound was muted. He went to his home office, a small room off the main living area that Elisha had once called his man cave with a roll of her eyes. It was the one space that felt like his, filled with books on coding, whiteboards covered in algorithms, and the worn-out chair from his first apartment. He sat down and opened his laptop, a 3-year-old MacBook Pro that was a tool, not a status symbol. Alicia appeared in the doorway, her Balmain dress looking absurdly out of place. "Cato, are you listening to me? What is wrong with you?" "My father was an ass, I get it. I'll talk to him. But you're acting like this is my fault." He looked up from the screen, his face a blank canvas. "How did you know the deal closed yesterday, Elisha?" he asked, his voice quiet. The question caught her off guard. She stammered for a moment. I have my sources. A friend of a friend at the bank. I heard whispers. I was trying to confirm it so we could celebrate properly. The lie was clumsy, poorly constructed. And the number? He pressed, his gaze unwavering. How did you know it was 500 million? Piper must have exaggerated. I just knew it was a big deal. You've been so secretive about it, Cato. I had to find out somehow. I felt shut out of my own husband's life. She was trying to pivot, to make herself the victim. It was a move he had seen her and her father execute 100 times. He simply nodded, a slow, deliberate motion. Okay, he said. He turned back to his laptop. The screen showed a secure log-in portal for his corporate bank account. The balance was a dizzying string of numbers, $500 million. She stood there for a full minute, waiting for the argument, for the shouting match that would allow her to cry and make him feel guilty. It never came. His silence was a wall she couldn't penetrate. Defeated, she finally left, muttering something about him being impossible. He heard her walk down the hall to the master suite and close the door with a little too much force. He spent the next hour acting with cold precision. He logged into his personal email and found the digital folder he'd labeled LLC Formation. Inside were the documents from October 17, 2018. The day he officially registered Aspen Snowmass Ventures, LLC. He and Alicia had gotten married on June 8, 2019, nearly 8 months later. Under Colorado law, it was clean. The company was premarital. It was his. The proceeds from its sale were his separate property. He had no idea how critical that piece of paper, a simple $50 filing with the Colorado Secretary of State, would become. He then composed a brief, polite email to his parents. Dear Mom and Dad, I have some incredible news to share. I'll call you tomorrow to explain everything. All my love, Cato. The next morning, Saturday, he woke up at his usual 6 a.m. He went to the kitchen. Alicia was already there, wearing a $600 silk robe, looking exhausted. She had tried to make coffee, but the expensive La Marzocco machine was blinking an error light. This stupid thing is broken, she snapped. Cato walked over, pressed 2 buttons in a sequence he knew by heart, and reset the machine. It whirred to life. He made 2 cups of coffee, handing one to her. Thank you, she said, her voice softer. She was trying a different tactic now, contrition. Look, Cato. Last night was a disaster. My dad was out of line. Piper was an idiot. But it's your birthday weekend. Let's not let them ruin it. What do you want to do today? We can do anything. Go to the St. Regis Spa. I'll book us the $1,500 couples package. He took a sip of his coffee. The taste was bitter. I have some work to catch up on, he said calmly, and I need to run some errands in town. Work? Cato, you just sold your company. For God's sake, can't you take a day off? The frustration was back in her voice. Just a few loose ends to tie up, he said. He finished his coffee, rinsed the mug, a simple ceramic one he'd owned for 15 years, and placed it in the dishwasher. He went to their bedroom and packed a small overnight bag, a change of clothes, his toiletries, his laptop. He took the $35,000 Patek Philippe watch from its box on his dresser and placed it on her side of the bed. She watched him from the doorway, her face a mixture of confusion and growing alarm. Where are you going? I'm staying at the Gant for a night, he said, naming a condominium hotel in town. I just need some space to think. It was a lie, but a necessary one. He was playing for time. To think? About what? Us? Her voice cracked. The first genuine emotion he'd heard from her in years. It was fear. He looked at her, the woman he had once loved so desperately. He saw the expensive robe, the perfectly styled hair, the calculated panic in her eyes, and he felt nothing but a vast, empty calm. "Yes," he said. "Us." He walked out of the $14.5 million house, got into his old Toyota, and drove away. He wasn't going to the Gant. He was going to a modest $250 a night hotel in Willits, a down valley town where real people lived, and he was going to prepare for war. Each mile he drove was another lie, another moment of feigned normalcy, while his entire world was being methodically dismantled and rebuilt inside his head. Sunday morning arrived with the crisp, clean light of the high mountains. At 9:03 a.m., Cato sat in a discreet corner of a small, independent coffee shop in Basalt, a town far from the prying eyes of Aspen's social scene. The coffee was $4, served in a paper cup. It tasted better than any coffee he'd had in years. Across from him sat Alani Morris, a woman who was widely regarded as the most feared divorce attorney in the state of Colorado. Alani was a sharp, elegant black woman in her late 50s, with intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She wore a simple black pantsuit that probably cost more than Cato's car, but she projected competence, not flash. She had agreed to this emergency Sunday meeting after a single, cryptic text from a mutual friend. "Cato needs you. It's a big one." Her fee was $1,200 per hour, and she was worth every penny. Cato had laid out the entire story, from the years of quiet humiliations to the disastrous birthday dinner. He spoke calmly, without emotion, presenting the facts as if he were delivering a technical briefing. He slid his laptop across the table. "Here is the LLC formation document, dated October 17, 2018, he said, pointing to the screen. "And here is our marriage certificate, dated June 8, 2019. Alani put on a pair of sleek, $800 Cartier reading glasses and examined the documents. She nodded slowly. "Clean. The company is unequivocally premarital property. Under Colorado Revised Statute 14-10-113, any increase in the value of separate property during the marriage is also considered separate property unless it can be proven that the increase was due to marital efforts. Her father will argue she contributed to my success by providing a stable home life," Cato said, his voice flat. Alani let out a short, dry laugh. "Let him try. Did she contribute financially to the business? Did she work for the company? Did her name appear on any of the corporate documents? No, to all of it. She called it my little project." "Perfect," Alani said, a predatory gleam in her eye. "We'll use that. Her own words will be her undoing." This was the callback technique, a specialty of hers. Cato then opened another file. It was a spreadsheet. For the past 2 years, he had been meticulously, almost subconsciously, tracking their expenses. He had logged every one of Elisha's purchases that he knew of: the $4,200 dress, the $15,000 bag she was coveting, her $800 weekly beauty appointments, the $20,000 she'd spent on a whim to redecorate the guest room. He had cross-referenced them with the withdrawals from the joint account they shared, an account funded disproportionately by her father's trust. His own contributions were a neat, consistent $2,500 a month from his modest salary. "This is a record of marital expenditures," Cato explained. "It shows a clear pattern of her using marital funds for personal luxury goods and services, while my contributions covered basic household necessities like utilities and groceries." Alani scrolled through the spreadsheet, her eyebrows rising. "Mr. Cato, you are a very unusual client. This is meticulous. This demonstrates that not only did she not contribute to the growth of your company, but her lifestyle actually constituted a drain on the marital estate, which you subsidized with your separate property salary." She looked up from the laptop, her expression one of genuine admiration. She and her father think you're a naive tech nerd. They have no idea they're dealing with a forensic accountant with a PhD in receipts. Cato didn't smile. What's the plan? Alani leaned forward, her voice low and strategic. The plan is to strike first and strike hard. We file tomorrow morning at 8:01 a.m. the moment the court opens. My paralegal will be waiting on the courthouse steps. The petition for dissolution will be filed along with an emergency motion for a temporary injunction. This will legally freeze all assets and, most importantly, explicitly designate the $500 million from the Vail sale as your disputed separate property, sequestering it from the marital estate until a final judgment is made. She continued, mapping out the steps with military precision. At 8:30 a.m., a process server will arrive at the Red Mountain House and serve Elisha with the papers. Simultaneously, I will send a certified letter and an email to her father, Beaumont, informing him that his daughter has been served and that any attempt to move or conceal assets will be considered contempt of court. We will also immediately file a notice of Eli's pendants on the Red Mountain property, clouding the title, and preventing him from selling or refinancing it out from under you until the court determines your equitable interest in the marital home, which, given your contributions, is not zero. How much will this cost? Cato asked. My retainer is $100,000, Alani said without blinking. Given the sums involved, it's a bargain. It will be the best money you ever spend. We will petition the court to have Elisha pay your legal fees from her share of the marital assets, arguing she is the one who necessitated this action. Cato nodded. Okay. He took out his phone, opened his banking app, and initiated a wire transfer. A moment later, a notification pinged on Alani's phone. She glanced at it. Retainer received, she said, her voice crisp. She stood up and extended a hand. Her grip was firm. Cato, go for a long run today. Clear your head. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we dismantle them. Not with anger, but with paper, with facts, and with the law. He shook her hand. For the first time since the dinner, he felt a flicker of something other than cold emptiness. It was the feeling of control. He was no longer a victim in their story. He was the author of his own. Monday morning, 7:58 a.m. The sky over Aspen was a brilliant, cloudless blue. Cato sat in his rented room at the Element Hotel in Willits, a cup of black coffee in his hand. The room was clean, anonymous, and cost $229 a night. On his laptop screen, he had two windows open. One was a live feed of his personal email. The other was a chat window connected directly to Alani Morris. A message popped up from Alani at 8:01 a.m. exactly. We are filed, case number 23DR107. The Honorable Judge Mariana Vasquez presiding. Good judge. Fair but tough. Motion for injunction is filed. The firewall is up. Cato took a slow breath. It had begun. At 8:32 a.m., his phone buzzed. It was a text from Alani. Server confirms physical service on Elisha at the Red Mountain residence. He said she went white as a sheet. Stand by. Cato stared at his phone. He imagined the scene, the doorbell ringing, Elisha, probably still in her silk robe, answering it, expecting a delivery from Net-a-Porter. A professional, impassive man handing her a thick manila envelope. Her confusion turning to disbelief, then to pure, unadulterated panic as she read the words, petition for dissolution of marriage. He didn't have to wait long. At 8:37 a.m., his phone lit up with an incoming call. Elisha. He let it go to voicemail. A second later, a notification appeared. Voicemail 1. He didn't listen. 8:39 a.m. Another call from Elisha. Voicemail 8:40 a.m. A text message. Cato, what the hell is this? You're divorcing me? After one bad night, call me now. 8:41 a.m. Another text. This is insane. You can't be serious. My dad is going to kill you. 8:43 a.m. An incoming call, Beaumont. Cato stared at the name, a cold knot tightening in his stomach. He silenced the call. Voicemail 3. The coordinated strike was working exactly as Alani had planned. It was a legal blitzkrieg, designed to overwhelm and disorient them, to prevent them from circling the wagons and hiding assets. Alani's chat window blinked. Beaumont's office just called me. His assistant was hysterical. I informed her I only speak with my client's husband's wife's father's legal counsel. He'll be scrambling to find an attorney who will take his call on a Monday morning. We have at least a 24-hour head start on strategy. Cato then did what Alani had instructed. He composed a simple, clear email. To Elisha Cato, CC Alani Morris. Subject, Communications. Elisha, as of 8:01 a.m. this morning, I have filed a petition for the dissolution of our marriage. You have been served. From this point forward, all communication regarding this matter must be directed to my attorney, Alani Morris. Her contact information is attached. Please forward this to your legal counsel. Any attempt to contact me directly will be logged and submitted to the court. I have arranged for your supplementary credit cards, which are tied to my personal accounts, to be deactivated at noon today. Your primary accounts, funded by your father's trust, are unaffected. All household bills for the Red Mountain property will be forwarded to you for payment. Cato. He hit send at 8:55 a.m. The response was instantaneous. His phone began to vibrate incessantly, a furious buzzing on the cheap laminate nightstand, a cascade of texts. From Elisha. You're cutting off my cards? Are you insane? I have a facial at 1 p.m. It's $600. You can't do this to me. This is my home. I'm calling your mother. She will talk some sense into you. From Beaumont, a series of increasingly unhinged texts. You ungrateful little punk. You think you can pull this stunt and get away with it? I will bury you. I will spend $10 million on lawyers to make sure you walk away with nothing but that rusty truck of yours. You have made the biggest mistake of your life. You are nothing without my family's name. Cato read the messages one by one. 1. The words that would have crippled him just 3 days ago now felt like the desperate flailings of a drowning man. Beaumont's threats were empty. He couldn't touch the $500 million. He couldn't touch Cato's company. He had built his power on intimidation and the illusion of control. Cato had just called his bluff with a handful of legal documents. At 12:01 p.m., Alani sent another message. Her Amex was just declined at Matsuhisa. The restaurant manager called me directly to ask for guidance. I told him to present the bill to Mrs. Cato. The strike is holding. They are in chaos. Well done. Cato closed his laptop. He stood up and walked to the window of his hotel room. It overlooked the parking lot and a Whole Foods. It was a world away from the sweeping vistas of Red Mountain. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he could breathe. The air was his own. The ground beneath his feet was his own. He had spent years living under the weight of their judgment, their expectations, their quiet contempt. The strike wasn't just a legal maneuver. It was an act of liberation. He was taking his life back, one filed motion at a time. The collapse was not a single dramatic event, but a cascade of failures, a slow public unraveling of the world Elisha and Beaumont had built. The consequences, enumerated with cold, hard numbers, arrived day by day. Consequence 1. The money. The first and most devastating blow was financial. Alani's injunction held firm. The $500 million was locked away in an escrow account, legally designated as Cato's separate property, pending final review. Beaumont hired a team of high-priced lawyers from a Denver firm, costing him an estimated $2,000 per hour, to fight it. They filed motion after motion, arguing that Elisha's spousal contribution of emotional support and maintaining a home entitled her to half. In the first hearing, Alani calmly presented Cato's spreadsheet of expenses. Then she produced a sworn affidavit from a former assistant of Elisha's, who testified that Elisha frequently referred to Cato's company as his silly computer game and spent her days shopping and at the spa. The judge, a no-nonsense woman with little patience for the games of the wealthy, was not impressed with their argument. She upheld the injunction. Elisha's access to Cato's fortune was gone. Her only income was the $30,000 monthly allowance from her father's trust, a sum that just weeks before seemed astronomical, but now barely covered the mortgage and upkeep on the Red Mountain house she was living in alone. Consequence 2. The house. The $14.5 million glass palace on Red Mountain became a gilded cage. With the Ellis pendants filed, Beaumont couldn't sell or leverage the property. The monthly carrying costs, mortgage, taxes, insurance, utilities, landscaping, pool service totaled over $42,000. Beaumont, furious at being legally hobbled, refused to pay them, telling Elisha it was her mess to clean up. After 2 months of missed payments, the bank sent a notice of default. The home, once a symbol of her family's power, was now a financial albatross, a public testament to their sudden fall from grace. The society pages of the Aspen Daily News reported on it with barely concealed glee. Consequence 3. The social humiliation. Aspen's elite society is small and insular. News of the divorce, the frozen assets, and Elisha's financial predicament spread like wildfire. The story was just too delicious. The quiet, underestimated tech husband turning the tables on the town's reigning princess and her tyrannical father. Invitations to exclusive dinners and gallery openings dried up. Friends who had once flocked to her side, like Piper, suddenly became distant, their calls going unanswered. The voicemails Cato received, which he forwarded to Alani without listening, told the story of Elisha's descent. They were a study in emotional disintegration. Voicemail 4, Monday, 2:15 p.m. Angry, defiant. Cato, you have no idea the war you just started. My father is going to ruin you. You will be begging for our forgiveness. Voicemail 8, Tuesday, 9:30 a.m. Pleading, manipulative. Baby, please, let's just talk. We can work this out. I love you. Don't let my father's big mouth ruin what we have. This legal stuff is so ugly. Let's just be us again. Voicemail 15, Friday, 11 p.m. Drunk, sobbing. I don't understand. Why are you doing this to me? Everyone is laughing at me. Piper won't even have lunch with me. You've destroyed my life. I hate you. I hate you. Voicemail 21, 2 weeks later, 3 a.m. Numb, resigned. Cato, I'm sitting in this huge, empty house. The power is going to be shut off tomorrow. My cards are all declined. Was it all a lie? Did you ever love me at all? Beaumont's downfall was more private, but no less complete. His reputation, built on being the smartest, most ruthless man in any room, was shattered. He had been outmaneuvered by the son-in-law he'd openly despised as a worthless nobody. At a board meeting for a Denver-based energy company, a rival he'd long feuded with reportedly quipped during a tense negotiation, "Careful, Beaumont, or I might have to hire your son-in-law to handle my finances." The story made the rounds, and the humiliation was absolute. He was no longer the predator, he was the punchline. His aura of invincibility was gone, replaced by the stench of defeat. Consequence 4, the legal reckoning. The divorce proceedings dragged on for 9 months. In the end, The court's decision was a brutal confirmation of everything Alani had predicted. The full $500 million from the sale of Aspen Snowmass Ventures was affirmed as Cato's sole and separate property. The court found that Elisha had made no tangible contribution to the business. For the division of marital assets, the judge looked at the Red Mountain house. Because Cato had contributed his salary to household expenses for 3 years, the court determined he had a small but tangible, equitable interest. The final settlement was stark. Elisha was awarded the marital furniture, her jewelry, including a $120,000 diamond necklace from Beaumont, and her Porsche. Cato was awarded his Toyota 4Runner, his personal effects, and a judgment against Elisha for $150,000 to cover his legal fees. Payable from her trust? The house went into foreclosure. Elisha was forced to move into a rented 2-bedroom condo in downtown Denver, a world away from the glamour of Aspen. Beaumont, having spent over $1.2 million in legal fees for a total loss, stopped speaking to his daughter for 6 months. Their dynasty of 2 had crumbled under the weight of their own arrogance. Cato watched it all from a distance. Through the filtered lens of Alani's updates, he felt no joy, no triumph. Just a profound sense of sorrow for the love he thought he'd had, and a quiet, steely resolve to build a new life on a foundation of truth. 1 year later, the autumn sun cast long shadows across the roaring Fork Valley. The aspens had turned a brilliant, fiery gold. Cato stood on the deck of his new home, a modest but beautiful 2,500 square foot house he'd had built in the town of Carbondale, 30 miles down the valley from Aspen. The house wasn't perched on a mountain for show. It was nestled by the Crystal River, surrounded by cottonwood trees. The total cost, land, and construction was $2.1 million paid in cash. It was a home, not a statement. He was no longer Cato, the underestimated husband. He was Cato, the founder of the Roaring Fork Future Fund. He had taken $100 million of his fortune and endowed a perpetual scholarship and incubator program. Its mission was simple: to provide funding, mentorship, and resources for young people, especially from underserved communities in Colorado's mountain towns who wanted to build careers in technology. He was giving them the chance he'd had to fight so hard for. The first class of 10 scholars, a diverse group of brilliant, hungry kids, had just started their freshman year at universities across the country, their tuition fully paid. His life was simpler now. His neat locks were a little longer, threaded with a few distinguished strands of gray at the temples. His daily uniform was no longer a forced Xenia sweater, but his comfortable, worn-in Patagonia fleece and a pair of jeans. He spent his mornings working with his foundation and his afternoons exploring the valley's endless network of trails on his bike, a high-end but not ostentatious $8,000 specialized Epic. This afternoon, he was riding along the Rio Grande Trail, the paved path that follows the old railway corridor. The air was cool, the rhythm of his pedaling a familiar, meditative beat. He passed families, other cyclists, people walking their dogs. It was a world of authentic, unpretentious life. As he rounded a bend near the Rock Bottom Ranch, he saw a woman walking toward him. It was Elisha. He almost didn't recognize her. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, not the elaborate braids. She wore jeans and a simple sweater. She looked normal and profoundly sad. He slowed his bike to a stop. She saw him and froze, her eyes widening. "Cato," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Elisha." They stood in silence for a moment, the river murmuring beside them. "I heard about what you're doing," she said, gesturing vaguely. "The foundation, it's a good thing." "Thank you," he said, her eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry," she said, and for the first time it sounded real. The performance was over. For everything. For my father. For how I treated you. You were building something real and I was just counting the money. I didn't know how to value anything else. My dad, he taught me that price was the only thing that mattered. Cato looked at her, and the last vestiges of the cold, empty space inside him finally warmed. He felt not anger, not pity, but a quiet sense of peace. He had forgiven her long ago, not for her sake, but for his own. Holding on to that bitterness was like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. I know, he said softly. I hope you find a way to value yourself, Elisha. For who you are, not for what you have. He gave her a small, final nod, clipped his shoes back into his pedals, and rode away. He didn't look back. True wealth is not measured in dollars, or in the height of the mountain your house is built on. It's not found in designer clothes or expensive cars. True wealth is purpose. It's freedom. It's the quiet satisfaction of building something that matters, something that will outlast you. It's the ability to breathe your own air, to stand on your own ground, and to know with absolute certainty that your worth is not determined by anyone's judgment but your own. It is the priceless piece of a life lived with integrity. What do you think is the true measure of a person's worth? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and please remember to subscribe to Love Beyond Pride for more stories about finding strength in the face of betrayal.